No, it's not a matchup of undefeated teams, but it is still huge. It's still enormous. Forget what happened at Illinois if you possibly can, Wisconsin fans. The season's still right in front of you. Much more difficult to get to the college football playoff, but focus on the Big Ten and, of course, focus on the Buckeyes coming up this Saturday. We got Tyler Hunt on the line to talk Ohio State and Wisconsin. You can join Tyler and the rest of the staff there at SB Nation on Buckeyes Fifth Quarter. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm good. Still trying to recover from that tough Illinois loss, but hopefully they got the opportunity in front of them to bounce back and right the ship this week, going on the road to take on the Buckeyes. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully they can get this thing turned back around.
Well, that was an early game on Saturday. It is Tuesday afternoon, so we're looking at 3 days, 72 hours. That seems about right to still recover from that kind of devastating of a loss, because it's one thing to say, okay, we're playing Michigan this week, we're playing Ohio State, it's going to be a tough game, and let's say you lose on a last-second field goal, and that's heartbreaking. But when it's completely out of nowhere, not expected, and the game was kind of moving along at a rate in which I expected it. Badgers jump out 10-0. They're not killing them. I thought it was going to be a sleepy kind of 10 to 14 point win for Wisconsin. Later in the game, they kick the field goal to go up 23-14. You think, okay, it's not real good. The game's still a game, but they get the 2-score lead, makes it probably pretty safe here. And then it all came crashing down in the final 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the turnovers were a big thing. Obviously, the last couple of years, Jonathan Taylor struggled with the fumble bug, but we haven't seen it so far this season. And then, it reared its ugly head this past Saturday. He put that one on the turf, which really kind of brought Illinois back to it and gave them some new life. And, of course, they went down and scored after that. And then, Wisconsin got the ball back, and, you still had an opportunity to run the clock out. You think with Jonathan Taylor, you get a couple first downs. You put this game away, you escape with the win. Yeah, it's not pretty, but you still got that 0 in the loss column. And then, of course, the Jack Cohn interception happened. And that, at that point to throw a pick, basically on your side of the 50, it really hurts because they only needed, 15, 20 yards, to set up that field goal. And, I kind of had a feeling as soon as that pick was, grabbed by Illinois that we were going to, lose that one and, be upset. It just had that feeling as soon as that pass was thrown. So
let's get something straight out there, because I've heard national commentators mention that this loss, for as ugly as it is, doesn't really matter. Well, it doesn't matter if you go undefeated the rest of the way. You should be in good shape to get to a college football playoff as Big Ten champion with one loss. But it matters, and we're not even putting Iowa and Minnesota and those difficult games into the equation. Just focus on this week in Columbus and then a Big Ten championship game. And no longer does the split become a fallback to say, hey, you lose in Columbus, there's no shame in that, especially if you lose a 1-score game. It's a very competitive game. Then you come back and you get your revenge against Ohio State, or maybe Penn State wins the East and you beat a really good Penn State team that's, say, 12-0, 11-1. And it's all lined up and you pretty much checked all the boxes. And despite the one trip up, again, it's against maybe the best team in the country. It's a playoff resume without a doubt. Now, to go up most likely against Ohio State twice and have to run the table and beating them twice, that's pretty much what has to happen here for the Badgers to think playoff. And, of course, the Big Ten needs to be first and foremost, but to think playoff.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely make it a lot harder on yourselves when you lose to a 2-4 Illinois team, and I don't. You can spin that narrative and say that they had their opportunities in the games in front of them, but it still makes it a lot more difficult when you lose to a team that you really shouldn't lose to. Yeah, they've got opportunities in front of them. They got Ohio State and then Minnesota and then Iowa on the schedule. And then if you took care of those three by chance, you still have a Big Ten championship against a probable quality East opponent in Ohio State or Penn State. But there's no doubt that it becomes a lot more difficult. When you lose to a team that you really shouldn't lose to. So that narrative that the season is all in front of them is true, but at the same time, you make it a lot harder for sure.
And again, this is coming from a guy who predicted chaos during the offseason, and I had Ohio State going to the playoff with 2 losses. So we got Tyler Hunt on the line from Buckeyes Fifth Quarter. Join him on SB Nation for Wisconsin coverage as the Badgers prepare to rebound in Columbus against the Buckeyes. So if we're having this discussion a week ago or 3 days ago, then we're talking about possibly the two teams that are playing the best football of anyone in the country, the most dominant football, both sides of the ball, special teams included. Now we're looking at, obviously, the letdown at Illinois. So we're looking at an Ohio State team that's running on all cylinders. And there's always going to be that narrative, Tyler, as you well know, in covering Ohio State via Wisconsin, that there's always going to be that narrative that, okay, for Wisconsin to keep up, they're going to have to be technically sound, fundamental, have to do all the right things. Ohio State's faster, they're quicker, they got better athletes. And so for Wisconsin to stay in the game, they've got to play not a perfect game, but a near perfect game. They've got to bring an A game. Ohio State can do something a little bit less. Do you think that narrative still is reality?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was doing some Ohio State research this morning for a couple of my columns on Buckeyes fifth quarter, and you look at almost every statistical category that matters. Ohio State is top 10 in pretty much everything. Havoc, defensive rate, defensive efficiency, offensive efficiency, anything that I really look at from a factor that has done really well. Those teams have, Ohio State has been towards the top. But at the same time, despite Wisconsin's bad loss, they're up, in terms of those categories pretty highly as well. They've got the top ranked defense still, despite giving up some bigger plays to Illinois. And so I think you definitely have to play your A game on the offensive side of the ball. I think the defense will have a bounce back week and play a lot better than what we saw last week. But at the same time, offense is going to have to be pretty much perfect in this one, because you've seen how dominating that Buckeyes defense can be. You've seen, guys like Chase Young on the edge that have just, caused a mess for teams. They're the top defense on third down right now. So the Badgers are going to have to really execute on the offensive side of the ball to keep them in the game, shorten the clock and keep Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins off the field as much as they possibly can.
And what I'm alluding to is the sheer talent. And if you believe in recruiting rankings, which I do generally, I think there are aberrations out there, and Wisconsin would be the classic example of such. They keep producing top 10 to 15 teams in the country with recruiting ranked classes in the 25 to 45 range, as I just glance at the 247 composite for the last 3 or 4 years, while Ohio State always brings a top 3 recruiting class to the table. So their roster is comprised of 4 and 5 stars ranked in the top 3 in the nation, and Wisconsin, again, is in the 25 to 45 range. But look at the games between the two teams. We'll throw out the 59-0 at the Big Ten championship game. They're typically very competitive, although Ohio State won in 2012 in Madison. They won in Columbus in 13. Yeah, the Big Ten championship blowout in 14. And then the most recent Big Ten championship game, in watching every play of that game, I thought Ohio State proved to be decidedly the better team, but they played themselves into mistakes, and Wisconsin was right there to possibly win the game in Ohio State territory at the end. So this has been a series that, as I mentioned a few weeks ago when we were setting up with Michigan State and Wisconsin, these have been the two programs that have pushed Ohio State more than any, and this would be the team right here, Wisconsin. So I'm still going to be fascinated by this matchup, and it's still enormous despite the loss against Illinois, Tyler.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I when you look back at the win-loss record for these two teams over the past decade, Ohio State has obviously had the most wins, but Wisconsin's 2 in the Big Ten. So these have been the two best programs, I think. I might be a little biased as a Wisconsin, follower, but I really do think these have been the consistent top programs in the Big Ten for 10 years now or so. And obviously Wisconsin certainly benefited a little bit from having a little bit easier division, but even in the early 2010s, there was the divisions where Ohio State and Wisconsin were in the same one. So you can see how these two teams have played well. Ohio State's one that's always had the Badgers number. Wisconsin will keep it close, and usually Ohio State makes enough plays at the end to squeak it out. So it's certainly something that Badger fans will be hoping to pull off that upset. I think as a rivalry standpoint, with obviously we have Minnesota, but that hasn't really been a rivalry until recently this past year. And then you've got Iowa that Wisconsin's always kind of found a way to beat them the last few years. So Ohio State's really that team that a lot of Badger fans are really hoping to, get over that hump and knock them off. And Usually we leave this game disappointed, but it's always one that gives you some hope. So I think it'll be another good one on Saturday.
To your point, Tyler, I ran the numbers since 2012, since Urban Meyer stepped on campus at Ohio State, because I was pretty much just going to verify what I already knew. Number one, that Ohio State's been clearly the best team in the Big Ten since Urban Meyer stepped on campus. So they've only lost 9 games since 2012. But Wisconsin, better record than Penn State, Michigan State, 25 losses during that time. So if you just look at the losses, which obviously the wins are going to be roughly the same because everybody plays almost exactly the same number of games. Ohio State's only lost 9 games since 2012. Wisconsin is at 25 losses. Michigan State, and Penn State are all at 30 to 33 losses. So Wisconsin has had the second best program and team in the Big Ten in the last 7 or 8 years. And I'm thinking back to the 2010 game in Madison, in which Bill Pryor and Ohio State came in as the number 1 team in the country and got ambushed by the Badgers 31 to 18. So Wisconsin will show up, not be intimidated by anybody, show up the horseshoe, and they're one of the programs and one of the teams that I fully expect that they're not going to be fazed by anything, and they're just going to play their game. And it may not be good enough, but they're not going to be swayed or intimidated by Ohio State's talent or speed or anything.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. This team, I know they had a rough loss this past weekend, and they were maybe in a kind of a trap look ahead spot to this Ohio State game. And, even Zach Bond, the Badger star linebacker, kind of alluded to that, post game last weekend that maybe there were some guys that were looking ahead and they weren't, fully focused on an Illinois team. And that happens in college football. It's a real thing. But that doesn't change the fact that they were geared up for this game maybe too much. And I think they're really looking forward to their shot to right this ship back around. They'll give their best effort and, probably play a really close game. Maybe it's enough, maybe it's not, but, they'll have to wait and see. But I don't expect, the Badgers to just go and lay down. They've been tested early in this season already with Michigan and Michigan State, who haven't had the seasons that they expected, but they're still quality, teams on paper. That a lot of people picked to finish a lot better than they might. So I think the Badgers certainly looking forward to getting their shot at probably the best team they've faced yet so far.
And Tyler, the other thing I recall from those 2 latest Big Ten championship games is that Ohio State really focused on Melvin Gordon and Jonathan Taylor, and they only ran for like 40 or 45 yards in those games. And they focused on, hey, this is what Wisconsin wants to do 70 to 75% of the time. They've got an elite running back. We're going to close them down. We'll take our chances against our elite corners covering their wide receivers. Now, I think the Badgers are much more capable of making them pay for that, number one. Number two, I'll bring up a narrative that we've talked about the past few weeks is when are we going to get to the point, and it's going to come at some point, regardless of the record, where Jack Cohn's down by 4 points with 80 yards to go in the final 2 minutes, and it's on him, and that obviously would be a fascinating scenario as well.
Yeah, I mean, Jack's certainly going to get that test. And you look at back in that Big Ten championship game in 2017, like you said, Jonathan Taylor was held pretty much in check for that game, and Alex Hornibrook had to make plays, and he didn't. I think the big thing in that one was turnovers. So if I recall, Hornibrook had 2 interceptions, including a late one that really hurt the Badgers. The defense got another stop, but it really put them behind the 8 ball, in terms of field position. So I think that's going to be crucial because you saw what the Badgers did when they turned the ball over last week, and it came back to bite them with a fumble and an interception. So far, Jack, up until this past week, has been pretty efficient with the football and took good care of the football. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets tested like that. If he's able to drop back and make throws. And right now, Ohio State's defensive line and front seven looks like it's going to be the biggest test. So far, they've been dominating in terms of sacks. And defensive pressure on the quarterback, so he's going to have to sit into that pocket and probably take some hits and make some throws. But at the same time, I think his weapons around him, with the Quintez Cephas and the reemergence of Jake Ferguson last week at tight end, has really benefited him. And he's going to have to keep stepping up and making those throws. But I think the biggest thing is going to be taking care of the football and sustaining some of those drives. The Badgers lead in terms of time of possession so far this season. And they're going to have to keep doing that and shorten the game to have any chance in this one.
All right, folks. So it's prediction time. So what this means is you can grab my weekly predictions. Week 9's coming up here this weekend. You can grab my predictions down in the description section below at Voice of College Football Community. I would like all of you to make your predictions, leave it down below in the comments section, and then you join Tyler and the rest of the staff there at Buckeyes Fifth Quarter to get their predictions later in the week on Ohio State, Wisconsin. The Badgers a 14.5-point underdog. It seems a little bit of a stretch to me, but I understand the Ohio State talent, and they keep covering these big lines, so that's what it is. But fortunately for all of us, they get on the field, and the line means nothing once they start popping pads. So, Tyler, enjoy the game. Hopefully it turns out for you, but it's a tremendous Wisconsin team, regardless of what happened at Illinois. And I'm going to be fascinated, regardless of what happens this week, by the Big Ten Western Division race, because I think Wisconsin's the best team, but I still think Iowa and Minnesota may have something to say about it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. Obviously, you know, the loss really hurts them in that Big Ten West race. They're kind of, you know, behind the 8 ball chasing Minnesota now. But at the same time, if you go out and handle your business in this one, you know, who knows what happens. It'll come down to some games late in the season with Minnesota and Iowa, but it'll be fun to see. And it certainly makes the West race a little bit more muddled, but, you know, you got to move on and, you know, take your shot again this week against, you know, arguably one of the best teams in the nation. So it'll be fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Tyler, thank you so much for stopping by as always.
Thank you. Absolutely.